You two messed up.
All right, I would like to welcome you to the regular board meeting of Upper School Division on Tuesday, March the 23rd. First, we have approval of the agenda. Before we approve, there are 2 items I would like to add to the agenda. In 5.7, I would like to add performance infrastructure program. And in 5.8, I would like to add pandemic plan.
I'll move approval of the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Tyler. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? So carried. Now we move to approval of the minutes. Are there any errors or omissions that have been noted? Thank you, Jen. Call the question, all in favor? So carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we will move to number 4, presentation, Edwin Parr nominee video.
My name is Michaela McNabb, and I'm a first-year teacher here at General Stewart School. I'm teaching kindergarten, and I'm also the learning support teacher. And I will tell a story of why I lived in Lethbridge. I have lived in Calgary my entire life, and I got a phone call from my principal here 7 days before the first day of school. And so, within 7 days, I packed up my life, found a place to live in Lethbridge, moved all my things in. I did an overhaul of the classroom. I wrapped my head around how to teach kindergarten and what learning support would look like. And it was the craziest 7 days of my life, but it was the best decision that I've ever made. And I think back to that phone call all the time and just how grateful I am to have had that opportunity. And I knew in my heart that this is where I needed to be, and I am just eternally grateful for this opportunity. As a first-year teacher, there's definitely a wake-up call from practicum. Like you walk in on the first day and it's like, okay, here I am, this is my class, this is my room for the year. And I have to say that with the support from this school, my first year teaching has really been incredible so far. And I feel so grateful to have such amazing students. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters, is just building those connections with your students. And no matter what happens during your day, as long as you've got your kids and you've built that relationship and you're laughing and they learn something, you're doing okay. And something that I've also learned as a first year teacher is that a lot of things that you plan don't go as you plan, and you really just need to be okay with it. Like just switching gears and saying, okay, this isn't working, I'm responding to a student need, and we're going to do something completely different, and then not to beat yourself up about it, because that's what it's about when you're first year teachers, figuring out your student voice and just going with the flow and being flexible. So that's something that I've learned this year that I will really take with me on my journey as a teacher. I do have to say, when I was in high school, I had one block a day in the learning support classroom, and I built a really strong relationship with my learning support teacher, and she really believed in me and just supported me through everything. And now that I'm a learning support teacher, it's so exciting to me and so honorable that I'm able to be that person for students just like me. And it's the most rewarding feeling to know that you're making an impact on young minds. And I actually, the other day, I'm doing learning support with an online student as well. And she sent me a message just saying, I'm so excited to see you tomorrow. And that just made my whole week, like my whole year, because I know that I have impacted her life positively and that she looks up to me and that she enjoys learning. And if I can make learning exciting and fun for a student, then that is my job, and that's why I'm a teacher.
Hello, my name is Chris Harris. I'm the principal of General Stewart Elementary. I am extremely excited to be able to talk about Michaela McNabb. She is our kindergarten teacher here. She's our learning support teacher. and she brought a tremendous amount of positive energy to our school. She's a diligent, extremely hardworking person, genuinely kind, caring. She goes above and beyond what you would expect to make connections with our students and with parents. She's always looking for creative ways to engage students and bring different aspects of culture into her classroom. She makes genuine connections with all of the students, and we are just very, very fortunate to have her here. I think she's a fantastic learning and empowering, and she's nothing but the best. Learning support teacher is a very challenging role because it's something that requires you to work with numerous students across a wide variety of different grade levels to help support them in a number of different ways. For a first year teacher to be able to come in and learn all the different procedures and protocols that we have for our division, to go through the level B assessment training, to be able to administer training and tests that way, and also be able to work with students both in the classroom and online to support them in different ways that they need assistance. She's done a fantastic job. She's also able to work with teachers to help them develop capacity in different ways that will help the students in their classroom. I believe Michaela has a tremendously bright future, and we are very, very excited that she's here with us.
Hi, I'm Sandra Hutchison, and I work at General Stewart as an educational assistant in Michaela at kindergarten classroom. And I just want to say she is an exceptional teacher. She's taken on a huge role of learning support and kindergarten teacher all in the same year, and she's doing a fantastic job and just is so calm at everything that she needs to learn. She doesn't get flustered. And yeah, you can tell that she loves her job and the students love her, and she's extremely creative, fresh ideas, and I love working with Michaela. It's been a great year.
I'm Mrs. McNabb because she's so sweet and because she plays fun things with us. She's very nice and she does fun stuff with us. I love Mrs. McNabb because she gives me hugs. And I love kindergarten to out it. I like that Mrs. McNabb teaches us good. Sure we do nice good work. Hi, I'm Jennifer Day, and I have a daughter in Michaela's class. Her name is Marlo, and I just want to say that I think Michaela is so deserving of this nomination. She is a first-year teacher who started it in pandemic, and that would be a challenge in and of itself. On top of that, she took over for a very well-loved teacher, Andrea Andrews. Those were big shoes to fill, and in spite of that, she is turning out to be well loved herself. I see that Marlo is just thriving socially, emotionally, and academically, and as a mom, I could wish for more for a teacher.
My name is Jalen, and my daughter Laura attends Michaela McNabb's kindergarten class. Aurora has actually taken a lot from Michaela's teaching, and she's actually shown a lot more interest in learning things as the days go on, and she's very vibrant, and she just loves learning in Michaela's class. I just hope that she continues to do, what she loves, and she always play with all of her students because it really resonates to the children, all of them, not just my own.
Hi, I'm Michaela Fine, and I work at General Stewart Elementary School, and I teach grade 1. We have a wonderful teacher here, Miss Pratt, and she has been fabulous at our school. She works very hard to engage her students. Our classroom is very friendly, and it's been so wonderful having another Michaela on staff to collaborate with.
Hi, I'm James Ellison, and I work at General Stewart Elementary, teaching grade 2, and I'm lucky to be a colleague of Ms. Michaela McNabb. She is an excellent teacher. She has amazing energy she's brought to the school. It's been amazing seeing her jump into this role with little to no notice and just take it in stride. I've been so impressed with how she's taken on the LSD role in our school as well. She just takes everything on without question and full confidence. She's great at collaborating with her team members, and it's always nice to hear the fun and excitement that we can bring to the schools. Congratulations, Michaela. Great work.
Hello, my name is Wendy McDonald, and I'm a grade 3-4 teacher at General Stewart Elementary School. We are so pleased and excited that Michaela was nominated for this award. She is well deserving. to take on 2 roles in 1 year. That would be kindergarten teacher and the learning support teacher. Would be daunting for an experienced teacher. She is a first-year teacher and she has taken on this challenge with grace and composure and loads of enthusiasm. We are thrilled to have her as a staff member for General Stewart.
Hi, my name is Kristen Garrett, and I teach grade 4 and grade 5 here at General Stewart School. I've had the pleasure and privilege to get to know Michaela a little bit over the past few months as she joined us. And she has been such a fantastic addition to our staff. She's so easy to work with and easygoing and kind to all of the students. I know that when she comes out to our room to participate in the learning support kit, they are all excited to talk to her and get to know her a little bit better. And she just has such a positive and great energy that she brings to the classroom and to everything that she does. So I want to congratulate her a whole bunch on her awesome and hard nomination. So with the global pandemic, it's obviously been a lot of disaster events after disaster events. This year in itself has been just a sad, crazy year. But I do have to say that reflecting on these past 6 months, they have been some of the most fulfilling and happiest months of my entire life. And that says so much about the Rutgers school community, General Stewart School, the staff, the students, the parents, everyone together has just changed my life in such a positive way. And I'm so humbled and grateful to be here. So thank you.
What a great video. Thank you. I know Michaela's not here with us now, but I just wanted to say to Michaela, thank you for sharing your love and gift of learning and teaching with your students. You are clearly loved and appreciated by your students and your coworkers, and already in such a short time, you've made an incredible impact on your school community and our division. So thank you for being part of our division family. Now we move forward to action items. The first is 5.1, early education program fee.
So this is just a recommendation to the board. From time to time, we've had to increase fees in response to market value and as well sustainability of programming. And due to our budget limitations for the 21-22 school year, we would like to make a recommendation to increase our fees monthly by $15 to make it an even $200 per month per paying student.
Thank you, Maureen. Any questions for Maureen?
How many paying students do we have?
I can provide you with the exact data. I don't want to speak to potential numbers. Currently, it is always changing because quite often our paying students, who are our neurotypical students, will have anywhere from 5 to 10 in a classroom, depending upon when they may progress down the line of being identified as exceptional. So as we know, e-programming is only for students, or it's geared towards students who have exceptionalities. And then often what will happen is with our holding space of 5 to 10 students, half of those students typically in a school year will become identified with exceptionalities in some way through the program unit funding model. So it would be safe to say 5 students typically per classroom, but again, we have some schools where they have no students paying because they are all program unit funding students.
So what would the total number of students be then? Like you said 5, but I don't know how many programs.
So currently we have 12 programs, and we could have anywhere from, I would say, 20 to 30 fee-paying students. As well, we do have challenges at times collecting fees for some of our students because of difficulties with funding. So, difficulties with financially being able to make that work, right? And so, what I can do for the board is at our next meeting, I can provide that data for you so that you have that.
Thank you. Any further questions for Lauren? Donna?
Would you just explain to me a little bit more clear so I know what's in, why one student is paying and what isn't?
So typically in a classroom, let's say we have 20 each students. We know that if we don't have 15 students who are identified with exceptionalities, they generate fees from program unit funding, right? And so their fees are covered through program unit funding. Students who are accessing EAP, they have to pay a fee because they have no other generating source to provide ongoing services and supports in that program. Does that help, Donna?
How do they get designated? And like, how does that figure out?
So how does a student get identified as program unit funding? It depends upon their exceptionality, right? So we're quite familiar with students who have speech language challenges. Of course, we know from Isabel's presentation last month that now the ability to become identified with speech language challenges is significantly more challenging because they've changed the criteria. But what we typically do is we work hand in hand with Alberta Health Services. For example, Isabella is working with a Welcome to Kindergarten screening process with Alberta Health Services, where we get assessments that may identify a child as having some kind of exception, like cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or beyond the autism spectrum disorder, or on the autism spectrum, right? And then that would immediately qualify them as a child who receives severe program unit funding, right? And that would then cover any kind of EA costs, SLP costs, OT costs, PT costs, psychology costs that are required.
Any other questions?
It is recommended that the board approve the early education program fee increase to $200 per month for the 2021-22 school year.
Thank you, Doug. Any further conversation? Clark?
I don't know what I want to vote on this because I don't know what number we're talking about. Like if there's 12 programs and some have nobody in it and some have 5, are we talking about 30 kids at $150 a kid? That's $4,500 spread across 12 programs. It seems like a lot of tiny little bit of money. And I think we have to be careful about these, and I don't know what other programs or what other divisions charge for EAP.
All right.
So we're still under the price that other divisions charge for early ed programming. Holy Spirit does charge $215, at least that's the most recent number we've received. I hear the caution when I last spoke with Isabel about this last year and he came. It was going to generate about 20,000 additional dollars for us. That's in fees, right? So that does make quite a significant difference when we're talking about an additional EA in the classroom. It might sound like not much, but it does make a significant difference for our programming, especially given the financial cutbacks that we're having to manage under the portfolio.
Yeah. But what I'll do is I'll bring the exact numbers for next week. For low income families, Maureen, for the ones that aren't under the PUF, for low income families that are paying, is there a subsidy? How much does subsidy pay? For the
So we don't have a specific subsidy for e-programming. That would be working specifically with various agencies. Sometimes, for example, there might be a refugee family in the community. There would be work with Lethbridge Family Services or a settlement worker who would find a way to support in whatever way we can. Mark DeBoer as well has been working closely with Isabel with families to come up with different payment plans to be flexible if they can't make that work. It's definitely an identified struggle as a whole because I think when we look at our school system, the optics are that we provide programming without any service or any fees, right? And I think the reality is we look at our other day home daycare providers, there is a fee that is responsible, and if we want to look at parallel services, that is the programming that we provide, right? And so, yeah.
Thank you, Maureen. Any further questions? Okay, that is for the motion. Call to question. All in favor? All opposed? So carries. Policy review. Trish, welcome. Just push the right button. The front side. Push the front side hard.
Use my teacher voice. Lola. That's so cute.
We'll get you. Oh, that's okay. I can. Oh, get it. Got it. Yeah.
No.
Well.
Everybody can hear me,
There.
right? All right, so we only have 4 policies.
There it
today. Thanks, Mia. I'll have to go upstairs and fix my computer for the electric shock I needed. So 4 policies to look at today. So the first one is 402.12 staff learning. Any questions? Again, we just went through some wording. 4.1, changing the school education plan to the insurance plan. Division from district. And changing the education act a little bit, section that will be changed and now change to be updated. And they're highlighted in the division policies, just the 601.1.1 school 3-year education plans. And just change the title change to insurance plan. To reflect the education plan. Any questions?
Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept this policy?
I move to approve policy 402.12, staff learning as learned.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? So carries.
Okay, the next policy, 403.3, employee discipline. We just updated again to reflect the Education Act and then just defining progressive discipline and proportional response. Mike is here to answer any questions as well if you have any about this policy. Any questions?
Wait, I do have a question. When I read the first sentence,
Yes,
it's very awkward.
it is very awkward.
So it almost-
be a word.
It almost needs to be a new sentence after experience or keep the and.
I wasn't involved in this change. Not sure that.
Oh, you know what, I think maybe it got mistyped, Trish, I remember this.
Yeah.
Was supposed to say,
The board is committed to ensuring that all members of the school community are provided with an exceptional educational experience in environments that are welcoming and respectful.
Oh, I see, okay.
I think that all members of school communities is supposed to replace all students, or it could say all students and, yeah, because actually,
Employee discipline policy.
Yeah,
What would that have to do with student body?
yeah.
Yeah, that's big employees.
yeah,
Putting at a high level.
so really it would be all members of school communities. Well, we don't even have to say education, we can say the board is going to ensure that all members of school communities are in environments that are welcoming, caring, respectful. Well, it's not only about that, it's also about. Yeah.
Put a period.
Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. The board is committed to ensuring that all students are provided with an exceptional educational experience and, comma, and all members of school communities are in,
You're missing a word.
we're missing a word,
In
are in environments that are welcoming, caring, respectful, productive, and safe, right?
No, R doesn't work.
No.
No.
Just school communities and environments that are welcoming, caring, respectful, productive, and safe.
The word you need to replace there is work. Like if you left work in, it would still work. For lack of a better word, but work isn't a very good word there.
Let's just take this back and look at it. And just bring it back.
Thank you.
I would just say, if you're gonna take it back, I would say that you can, and it would clean it up a lot, is I don't think that under employee discipline in a policy, you need to mention that all students are provided with an exceptional education experience. I guess, yes, we want to do that, but I don't know that that needs to be a part of an employee discipline policy.
But
Providing with the teacher. The teacher isn't performing, that's affecting the exceptional education experience. I can see how that would fit.
we'll take that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next policy, 5.9, appeals concerning student matters. So if you, there's also one without the red, there's no red, on the tracking there. Again, so just some rewording, some cleaning up of the policy. And updating from the Education Act as well, from that in section 41. Any questions on this one?
And my only observation was, just the consistency of the plural throughout. Students, parents, guardians, or where am I? Oh, no, sorry. In number 2, the word guardians is omitted. See, every other place you have parents / guardians. So at the end of number 2, guardians is omitted. It would be good for consistency to have that there. And in the first sentence, affects the education of a student in importance. So either take out the A or take out the S, surrounding that students. Any other feedback? ahead.
I had questions around, let's see, say under regulations in 3, where it says the appeal to the board must be made within 10 business days. I don't know what constitutes a business day in a school division, and I don't know if that would be very clear if something happens 2 days prior to summer break. Are those business days, or does that mean that we can do this 2 months later, or Christmas break, or Easter break, you know what I mean? I think it should just be a number of days, of business days. In this case, just because I think it's confusing to know what constitutes a business day in the school. A student day, a staff day.
Right.
I would hope they are operational days, because quite often if it's an appeal relating to programming, we'll require staff to provide us with information about the program of the student. And so if it's, say, through Christmas holidays, we would get a bit of a challenge trying to get all the information together and actually access employee feedback, if you went on vacation, et cetera. So I would want it to be operational business days, or maybe that's the term, I don't know. And it would need to be days when staff are in.
So defining staff are in terms of school operational days, not division office operational days, that's what you're saying, so we would have to define that by, so if someone appeals something and a decision is given to them June 28th, they would have until September something to appeal, that makes sense. Because you're right, there wouldn't necessarily be the, personnel in place that would need to inform things. So we could say the appeal to the board must be made within 10 school operational days. Just to make it clear that we mean the school calendar, school operational days.
Any other discussion?
I move to approve policy 50519, appeals concerning student matters. As amended.
Thank you. Any further conversation? Call the question, all in favor? So carried. Mike has just informed me he has a suggestion for policy 403.3. So if we could go back to that and hear his suggestion.
Yeah, certainly we can go back and revisit it, but we could also just get rid of, if everyone's agreeable, the first sentence there. We just started with the board has high expectations for employee conduct. When employee conduct holds low expectations, the board is going to address this.
Yeah. We'll just go down to the, that's because that's part of the preamble there already, right? The board has high expectations.
Yeah, so we just started there, we get rid of that whole first sentence.
Would everybody be supportive of that change?
Yeah.
We just started off with, the board has high expectations for employee conduct. When employee conduct falls below expectations, the board is committed to addressing these situations.
So essentially we're taking out that first round sentence.
It makes it maybe a little clearer and more direct instead of sort of wandering around philosophically.
Any discussion?
I move to approve policy 403.2, employee discipline, as amended.
Thank you, Lola. Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor? So carried. Thank you.
Okay, the last policy for today, 1003.1, child disputes resolution. Again, just cleaning up the division district words and exchanging 11 for 14, so just cleaning up the wording in this policy, making it a little bit more clear. And adding in the proper section from the education act.
Tyler,
This policy in the, or well, wherever it is, under regulations again, has reference to work days again. I just think we should follow the same school operational days.
School operation.
We do have employees though that work beyond school hours. So I know that one's ready to speak matters. This is dispute resolution. Could this involve all employee groups? Might be operational days, not school operational days. Yeah, this would be all.
Could be operating.
This one says work, so it's still a little bit operational.
Tyler, what number are you on?
It's in 14.1.2. Well, actually, 14.1.1.1.2.
Five, what the.
Yes, the first one is for parents and guardians, so that's probably a school operational day. Addressing students again, so in this case, it should probably be school days.
Then that would be school.
Yeah. School operation. Same with 14.1.2 as well.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Clark,
Simple one first, it's the heading on this one is spells division wrong. So that should probably change. And then the other concern I have has always been under number 11. As an elected board, that diagram suggests that the public is not to communicate with us. And every time somebody calls me or emails me, I feel like I'm in conflict with this policy. And so I don't like that diagram because it doesn't reflect practice. And we should be practicing our policy, and I think it's unrealistic and wrong, quite frankly, to suggest that a member of the public can't contact anybody on that list. Because where would if it was a public member, they wouldn't have a staff member. They might not know who to contact. They might contact Cheryl first, and wouldn't that be? If Cheryl said, well, I'm sorry, you've got to contact a staff member because policy 1003.1 says there's no arrow to it. I think if we just get rid of the chart, the other things kind of suggest what's happening. And I just don't know why that chart is there.
all right,
I believe this is in just disputes resolution protocol, not in regular communication. So I just want to be thoughtful about that because as we know, when there are conflicts at, say, the school level, we always encourage through communication to work where the problem is currently happening, right? It doesn't mean, even though the disputes resolution process It does not mean that public cannot contact any one of us anytime, but it's saying the process of the disputes resolution has to work through this process. As a matter of fact, I do believe we have a communication policy that does indicate more of a dynamic, communication model, right? But I understand your point there, Clark, because it would be unfortunate if people read this first without looking at communications and assume that that's how we always communicate. That's not the case. This is about disputes resolution.
What's the policy that?
Lord, there's not a one.
I don't think so.
No, maybe two.
So I think that brings a good point, because this says communication and dispute resolution. And you're right, we do need to be approachable, and people do need to be able to connect with us and engage with us. And so in number 11, it does say trustees and stakeholders shall respect the following channels of communication. It doesn't say dispute resolution.
Yep.
And so I would agree with Clark and that.
So that diagram should actually come under the disputes resolution, header, like. That should come under dispute resolution and then the diagram there, right? Because disputes resolution, that is important with respect to the channel, but number 11 here gives the impression that no matter what the nature of the conversation, you're right, first you have to, what has nothing to do with the staff member or the supervisor, right? What if it's a governance question, right? What if it's a governance related matter? Trustees, I think there's something with the trustees that non-governance related matters should be referred properly. And that's where I think it's really important that to be honest, that piece is understood, right? That when it's a non-governance matter, and whether this just needs to be taken and looked at again, I think, because, I don't know, I mean, I think it's fraught with peril if we have staff members phoning board members about an issue, as opposed to talking to school administrators or the department that oversees that area, or because then they've turned management or internal processes or structures into politics, as opposed to working properly through channels. Governance is politics. Governance is elected officials who are basically part of politics, making governance decisions, which are distinctly different than the administration and management decision-making parameters. And so I think when you don't make those clear, that we can run ourselves into difficulty.
All right.
Could I just get you to scroll up a step, please? Christine? All the way up to the number? Okay. Are you able to do the communication? Yeah, because we had the communications before. This is sort of an area of 01. I'm with you. So there was an independent standing communication on the board. That's why I was confused. Thank you. Yeah, communications.
Thank you. So can we send this back for a little more clarity work? Great, thanks so much, Trish. And now we will move on to 5.3, our second quarter financial reports.
We just have to get our director of finance. Just not sure if he's coming in by teams or if he's here. They're coming in first. You want to go see Gerd? If he's here? No, coming by teams. He's coming. Okay. giving us the second quarter financial report. And I just want to take this opportunity to, Mark is going to be a new father in a week, well, who knows, a few days, could be a couple weeks, so, congratulations on that.
Christine, my birthday. All right, so I'm pleased to present the 2021 second quarter report, financial plan, ending February 2021. This presentation is an overview of the quarterly reporting and is a supplement to the actual report that we provide on the website, which is up on the website now, and the other reporting that we have on our website, RBI. These reports are based on the operating budget. And like other reports, the operating budget has been updated in the September 30th budget. As you can see, the vast majority of the updates were done in the last one. The only change to the budget or the operating budget would be a decrease to the international program. Originally, it was about 300,000 based on a certain number of students. And then we touched so much in contingency on the expense side, so with the reduced enrollment with the international students, we reduced the revenues to what's realistically going to be the more accurate number, and we reduced the budget expenditures by removing that. Similar to other quarterly reports, we use that tachometer to show how much, so 25% by each of the colors. The forecast is based on how much we have spent, based or how much we should have spent based on the normal timing of transaction. And the red little tachometer to show where we actually are at. Similar with the little circle or the sunburst diagram, budget would be the total amount, the green portion is the forecast, and the red portion is what we are here today. And we also use check marks just for a quick little indicator to show where we are at or how we compare budget. So just starting with revenues. Overall, the revenues are very comparable to forecast. We're at 98% of the forecast. The largest variance relates to the Alberta education funding, which is based on the timing of grants. The largest area or change in this is the reduction in the IMR operating revenues that have been recognized. At this time, most of our IMR and TMR projects have been capital in nature. So that funding then moves to capital funding. So as we have reduced operating expenditures, our revenues that are recognized are reduced as well. And those large projects this year, obviously, were the HVAC project for Buchanan and Westminster. Just one item to note is that the provincial funding that has been recognized does include the weighted moving average deferral for 2021. That's part of the funding framework, and we are still here from the province whether or not that deferral is going to be still applicable, or if it's going to be however we wait until the funding profile is actually released. And I've been checking it twice a day or more, and it's still not released as of this afternoon. Just moving on to expenditures. Overall, the division is comparable to forecast. We're at 94%. Sorry about that. Trying to have it where you guys can see the bottom part. Overall, we're at 94% of the forecast. And I'll go into each different sections to go over different types of programs and different types of expenditures, which was one of the much more detailed. So just starting with pre-K, as you can see, we're at 51.4% of the total budget, which equates equates to about 94% of the forecast. It is slightly lower than our normal timing transaction, as we've had some savings within some staffing and some unused contingency at this point. But overall, we consider this to be in line with the budget. Moving on to construction for K-12. As you can see, we're at 49.4% of the total budget, which equates to 96% of the forecast. The largest portion of this expense relates to schools. The schools are currently at 97% of the forecast, where it is looking like there's potentially some unused contingency accounts that may be carrying over or unspent with, at the school level. Inclusive learning supports are at 93%, whereas there's been some savings on staffing as they've hired based on student needs, and there was some specific positions that were not able to fill in those respective positions. There was also some savings on contracted services, specifically for low incident services, which is done on a collaborative basis with a number of other school divisions as well. There's also some savings related to the timing of staff that's being hired. The biggest one being the staff being hired at the federal Safe Return to Class grant. Many of these staff were hired mid to late September, and then will be hired for the end of the year based on their contract. So it's not a true 25% distribution this month. But overall, we're under budget and considered overall in line with the budget. Moving on to operation and maintenance. As you can see, we're at 45.8% of the total budget, which equates to 84% of the forecast. Just like the IMR revenues, we do have some savings right now related to the IMR operating expenditures, because a large portion of that year was capitalized. So our operating expenditures and the related revenues are less than what we projected. Overall, we're definitely within budget, especially when we take into account the revenues that offset that reduction. But I think that we're doing this very well. Moving on to transportation. As you can see, we're at 45.4% of the total budget, which equates to 91% of the forecast. As discussed with other reporting in the last little bit, the division is in the process of changing service provider, in which the division does not have the additional costs this year for the city bus replacement fund. However, as now we're transitioning to Southland, this will be a new model and how we're able to do it as well. However, we do see some savings this year as part of that transition. Overall, our expenditures are less than budget. They're in line. Moving on to board and administration. As you can see, it's at 50.5%, which relates to 95% of the forecast. And overall, we're considered in line with the budget. Moving on to external services, which is our international program. As you can see, we're at 35.7% of the expenditures total budget so far, which is that updated budget of $216,000. This is at 69% of the forecast. Like I indicated, the budget did decrease from 300,000 to 260,000 related to the reduction in international students, especially with COVID. With this budget center, or with this department, there's a lot of expenditures that happen towards the end of the year, especially with the amounts that are distributed out to the schools. So overall, we're considered in line with the budget, definitely less than the forecast. So moving on to the different types of expenses, starting with salary, benefits, and professional development. Overall, as you can see, we're very comparable to the actual forecast, as we're at 49.8% of the total budget. Similar to what I've indicated before, some of these savings relate to the timing of staff being hired, especially with the Safe Return to Class fund, the federal grant. There's been some staffing savings as we've hired additional assistants based on student needs this year, and as we've had reduced overall student enrollment, those requirements have been reduced as well at the same rate. There's also additional savings on professional development this year, as with COVID and all online meetings, the opportunities for professional development have been reduced. Overall, we're definitely within our forecast and our budget. Moving on to contracted services. We're at 49% of the total budget. We're definitely forecast as well. Some of the reasons why we're less than forecast and budget is that the contracted services related to low incident services, which are done in collaboration with other school divisions, was less than what we expected. One of the big reasons is when we budgeted, this was part of the change with RCSD, and we weren't sure exactly what school divisions versus Alberta Health Services were responsible for. So when it was budgeted, it included both low incidents and complex services, where subsequent to the budget, we decided that Alberta Health Services was responsible for the complex needs, where we were still retaining low incident services. Some other savings that we've had within contracted services also include the transportation costs, with us not having paid in towards the city bus replacement fund. And there's also been some savings on maintenance costs, as many of these costs happen during the summer when we're not in school. Overall, we're definitely within our forecast and our budget. Moving on to other services. Currently, we're at 76% of budget, and you can see we're definitely within our forecast. As you can see by the forecast, the vast majority of these expenses are towards the beginning of the year. So our year-to-date also relates to that, especially with insurance, one of the biggest ones. Overall, we have had some savings on rentals and insurance costs, which is partially a timing issue, how we're billed for insurance, and based on our fiscal year as well. So next year, we're going to see some increase as well in that area. But overall, we're within our budget, within our forecast. Moving on to supplies. Overall, we're at 42.5% of the total budget. We're less than forecast, as many of the general school supply orders for schools are done later on in the year, and there's still some equipment that needs to be purchased. Overall, this looks like a timing issue at this point. So we consider the budget, as these costs will come up later. Moving on to other expenditures, as you can see, significantly less than forecast. The vast majority of this budget relates to contingency accounts, and a large portion of that relates to school contingency accounts. As you can see at this point, the schools have not needed to utilize as much of their contingency. Often you see more use towards the end of the year if required, when they've used up their other budgets, and then they have to pull to cover additional costs. Overall, you can definitely see we're within our forecast and budget. Last one is our transfers SGF capital IMR. As you can see, we're at 41.9% of the budget. Oh, we're at 38.6% of the budget. And the largest reason why we're less than forecast is due to that IMR operating cost, as the vast majority of the costs we capitalize. I know this is repetitive, it's revenues and the program and the type, but that's one of the largest reasons. Overall, we're definitely in our forecast, and our year-to-date in this area as well. Just moving on to where we're forecasting for the end of the year at this point. As shown up on the screen, and there's a lot more information with the actual report as well. We have seen some increases from our budget in our federal and other government. That relates to our tuition agreement with Kainai Board of Education. There was just some more students that were in Kainai that were attending our schools this year compared to budget. So we're going to see a bit of an increase in that area. relation to investment income, we're looking like we're gonna not realize our budget at all. As you guys know, with COVID, prime rate has dropped very much. So we haven't been able to realize the same levels of investment income that we've seen in the past. Hopefully that will grow in the future. But right now we're looking at, we're gonna be a little bit less than budget, in just that area, but overall our revenues are gonna be more than what we're expecting. Just a little disclaimer on this, once again, with the provincial funding, the deferral of, the COVID or reduced enrollment is included here. So if province says we're actually gonna hold you harmless in the details, that would change this, but at this point, and as of this afternoon, we still don't know that for sure, so we've left that at this point. When we're looking at the expenditures, we do see some projected savings at this point. There's some staffing and savings on see within pre-K, there'll be slight savings in that area. K-12 instruction is where we're going to see probably the biggest amount of savings. At the school level, there's many contingency accounts that haven't been fully utilized at this point. We projected out to the end of the year. However, that one we always have to take with a grain of salt because they could use actions towards the end of the year. But at this time, we're looking like we're going to have some savings in that area. There's savings within inclusive education as they staff based on student needs and with production of students because of COVID. We've seen some savings there, as well as the savings on contracted services for us only having probably the low incident reporting, not complex. There was also some additional online teaching staff that were able to be reallocated for savings in the safe return class as well. We're going to see a bit of savings there. Then on transportation, as we're not having to contribute into the city's bus replacement fund, we're also likely going to see some savings that year or this year as well. So we projected that out. So overall, we're looking to see about $2 million savings. Once again, it would go into reserves, or if the costs actually come during the year, then we'll be able to offset savings with any additional costs that's being incurred. Moving on to the statement of financial position. So luckily, last year, the province changed the financial statements. That way they break out the spent deferred capital contributions. So I don't have to do that full song and dance every time to explain that it's part of our liabilities, but we have to remove it because it's actually a separate item. So overall, the net financial assets are about 18 million compared to 12 million last year. The increase specifically relates to increase in reserves and savings at this point. It also relates to the timing of when some of these capital projects are occurring. The non-financial assets, including our tangible capital assets and our spent deferred capital contributions, they have both increased. The largest reason is the construction of Dr. Robert Paxton Elementary School, as we have an increase in both the assets and the liability for the spent deferred capital contribution. That's the supported portion. So I highly recommend everyone to still see the actual quarterly report that has a lot of the details within the report. We also, once again, have our interactive financial reporting dashboards. We have it both on our quarterly reporting as well as a live financial reporting dashboard that's available on our website and to the public. Is there any additional questions?
I move that the board receive the 2021 second quarter financial report as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any questions for Mark? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for all your work and keeping us apprised of the finances of the division. You do it with integrity and you are appreciated very much. So good luck with this week, and we look forward to hearing your good news. For your growing family. Thank you. All right, 5.4, board budget release statement.
Okay, so, at your board planning retreat, we presented, your board release statements for a review, and then we're here again for a second review and, approval. As you know, the release statement new guide is development for the budget, and so we've already started using this to change, and of course, we will, react to that change in our further budget discussions. This hasn't changed from last year, but it would change now since you've had time to consider it since you're strategic plan. Certainly look at that now, but basically, the budget is developed in a fiscal manner to make sure that we're optimizing that to the needs of our students within a balanced budget. Your budget believes that it should be developed in the best interest of all students. The board believes the budget process is open and transparent. The board believes that the budget shall provide for staffing to facilitate educational opportunities for all students. The board believes that education at the primary level is foundational for student success, and as such is a priority. The board believes that funds need to be allocated to promote equitable access to educational opportunities and resources for all students. The board believes in provision and school levies as little as possible. The board believes maintaining an uncommitted reserve is necessary for emergency situations. The board believes that equitable opportunities for student learning are achieved by allocating funds to specific centralized programs and services. And finally, the board believes in promoting targeted opportunities to further innovative practices in schools. And of course, these are not in any order.
Thank you, Christine. Any feedback or comment? I just noticed that in division budget, in the paragraph, division should be capitalized just to be consistent with all the other divisions. On this part? Clark.
I think my English teacher might be proud of me, but I think in bullet number 1, for example, the board believes that the budget, since we're referring to a specific budget there, it should be capitalized as well. The one below it says the board believes in a budget process. That's not the same. We're not talking about it. Third bullet also is the budget capitalized. And I think that is it. And it should be where Kristen said.
Would your English teacher also tell you to take out that?
What's
Like, let's say the first sentence, the board believes no budget should be built.
Yes.
Okay.
My English teacher,
You got a good English teacher.
every that. My English teacher would remove. Take out from that.
I'll take some dots. Okay, yes, and this is, wow, take out all the vowels.
But that's good.
That. Okay.
Any further discussion?
We need a motion to amend it.
Motion to adopt the board statement as amended.
I will so move, she said.
Tyler is before a motion. Any further conversation? Call the question, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Christine. All right, on our agenda, we have public forum at 5 o'clock. Garrett, do we have anybody attending public forum today? Is that ready to go, or you don't have anybody right now? Oh, sorry. Leanne?
I'm just looking to see if anyone is calling in. They are not at this point. It's 4:53 on my clock.
Okay. So we'll move forward. Our public forum begins at 5. Leanne, possibly at 5 o'clock, if somebody is out, and if you could just let me know, and you can pause where we're at and open our public forum. All right, 5.5, capital plan.
All right. Thank you very much. So in the board package is the executive summary to the 3-year capital plan for 2021-22, 23-24. And then on the website is a 130-page detailed document that we've had every year. This document that we're submitting is very similar in past years. The biggest change is number 1 has been approved. So you will see an approved stamp all over number 1. And so we're excited that the new school West Lethbridge for Gary Station was announced on March 10th. So that's after years of being number 1, it's now will move in next year's plan to current project. So we're pretty excited about that. Number 2 project is will be Galbraith, and it will move into the number 1 slot. I usually send a letter that accompanies the capital plan, and one of the things I will be asking is that, of course, they recognize that as our new number 1, the Galbraith modernization, as well as we're actually going to ask to participate in a value scoping opportunity on Galbraith, and we're hoping that we'll get that opportunity. So first of all, just talk about some of the things we look at when we look at the capital plan. Certainly with Lethbridge, a dynamic growing city, which we've talked about it a lot over the last several months, and it has an impact on our capital plan. We put a lot of enrollment statistics in our capital plan. We do projections, that sort of thing. Projections, of course, have been impacted by a couple things in this capital plan. Number 1, a significant drop in student enrollment this year because of COVID-19, over 465 students. And so what that has done is that actually throws out our projections going forward. But I have data that I use Veritor data, they do their best guess. And so we have impacted the projections going forward in this plan. And so all over the plan, it talks about impact of COVID-19. So it'll take a couple of years for those patterns to come back up to, I guess, be a little more verified in our capital plan going forward. But nonetheless, we still use the data that we have. Also, of course, our boundary review changes will impact go forward, of course, how our projections. So if these projections are based on our September 30th numbers, go forward, this is before boundary changes, we have commented in the capital plan about the boundary changes, and we provided the new maps in there as well. So it is in our capital plan. Alberta Ed was well aware of our boundary process before that happened. So based on impacts of COVID going forward, we are actually projecting still to increase the number of students by 2023 by about 7.3%. Our largest increase will be at high school, which is fascinating. That's the same last year. So again, that's that big elementary level, middle school, and then moving on to high school. Our core utilization in West Lethbridge is still very high, 140%, and that of course is before boundary changes. So that's significant. Of course, new school construction. We've asked for 2 new schools in our capital plan. Number 1 was the West Lethbridge Elementary School in Gary Station, yay, approved. Now we asked for a 900 student school. My understanding, I have not seen the details yet, we'll get official details, is that will be approved for a 610 school with a build out to 900 students. What that should mean is that our core will be much bigger, about a third bigger, so that we can accommodate those 900 students build out. And then our second, of course, new construction will be another school in West Lethbridge, and that will be on the south side, because the south side still has a lot of growth and excess because of all the modular classrooms on our schools, and new schools also. But it's lower down in our part. Major modernizations. So number 1, Galbraith, of course, and they will actually get the number 1 spot in the overall plan. And then the only other change we've done this year, as you can see where the gold star is, we have added Victoria Park High School to our modernization requests. We need to do some work over at Victoria Park, and we're going to try and take care of some of that in little bits and pieces as much as we have with IMR and CMR and that sort of thing. But it really does need, for functionality and optimal learning, it needs a really good modernization, it needs, an elevator. Of course, it does need that ventilation system, and, you know, we can try and take care of it outside of the modernization, we will. So that is what's new, in this plan. Our plan is more than a 3-year plan. You can see with the number of projects we're asking, it's more like a 10 to 15-year plan, if we treated it that way. And so that's the biggest change. Senator Buchanan and Westminster, yeah, they're near to the bottom. There's still work to be done there, even though we've got the big ventilation, ventilation and some of the classroom upgrades there. Still need an elevator at Westminster, particularly. Buchanan, their gym is way too small for elementary school. It needs to be upgraded. So there's a couple of details that need to be taken care of there. And that's essentially our capital plan in a high level overview in 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Christine. Any questions for Christine? Well, it's great to tick one off the bottom. It's a good feeling.
Yeah.
We do need a motion to accept the 2022-2024 capital plan as presented.
I move to approve the 3-year capital plan of 2021-22 as presented.
2022 to 2024.
As presented.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor? So carried. Thank you. Oh, perfect. Okay. Great timing. 5:01, we're a minute late. Brandon, sorry about that. So we will jump ahead to our public forum, which is scheduled for 5 o'clock. What we have started this month is, prior to this month, when COVID protocols started, we had video submissions entered in on the division website. And now to just allow for greater participation, we are doing our video submissions through Teams. So people submitting presentations to public forum can join us in a Teams meeting. So today we're going to welcome, I think Brandon, I think Allison might be with Brandon? Braden, sorry, thank you, thank you. We'll just wait for them to pop up on screen.
Just trying to get the camera to come on.
Oh, of course.
I'm not sure why, Leanne, is there a reason that won't let us click the camera?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you check your settings, your team settings also?
There we go. Should be working now. There we go.
Oh, there it is. Perfect. Great to see you.
Yeah. So it's Bradley, actually, that I have with me. So he was one that came last month and presented on the video with me as well. Wanted to come and say thank you for providing us with the letter. Bradley did some follow-up once he received the letter and spoke with staff at school in regards to how we could get moving forward with esports, a virtual activity that is totally 100% safe, full-on participation from staff with no issue. And he was instead presented with issue that he's actually not allowed to carry forward with this. And in reading the letter that is in all of your board packages 7.1, when you read the first main paragraph that states that co-curricular, extracurricular activities are decisions that are left to the schools to make, and that schools need to examine that they have staff that's able to do that. That basically says to a student that would be to go ahead. Is that kind of the impression you got, Bradley?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with that, you took upon yourself to go and talk with the teacher and see about getting this all started, figuring out how you can, virtually get other kids to get rolling with it. And the frustration comes is that the second main paragraph supposedly states that he actually can't do that. So we're just kind of looking for some information, some clarification, because that second main paragraph doesn't state anybody that we've shown this to, that the first paragraph actually doesn't exist, or it's not real, it doesn't matter, it's not a decision for the school to make. So the second main paragraph doesn't clearly state that the school can't make that decision. So we're looking for some clarification and maybe some direction of him being able to carry forward with doing a virtual activity that should be no reason not to.
Thank you, Allison. Sorry, I was just grabbing a piece of paper for Cheryl. Typically our public forum aren't places for deliberation back and forth. So Brandon and Allison, I'll read you the response that we give in a public forum presentation. I know Allison, you've heard this before, but I will read it. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you both for your presentation. We appreciate public members coming forward to express a concern or perspective, and you can be assured that the board will carefully consider what you have said today and provide a response in the near future. Now, I can say that I spoke, Brandon, I spoke with your mom earlier today, and we did try to journey through the miscommunication, and certainly we will be in contact again regarding this letter and clarity and next steps moving forward.
And I can understand and appreciate that, but at some point we need to look at moving forward for these students. It's about the well-being for our students. We want them to be innovative. We want them to be creative. We want them to be making these steps and making some decisions that are appropriate for themselves. And instead, we're putting roadblocks for these kids. It was a month ago that we came forward and nothing's changed. So what is very frustrating for Bradley is that there hasn't been any further description of why a completely safe activity can't carry forward. So in a response back would be most beneficial to say that this is the reason why you can't do an event or an activity that's 100% safe. So a month later and he still hasn't received that. It's pretty frustrating for students within the school division to be able to come forward and not be able to move forward with something that he's taking the leadership to do. So it's pretty frustrating, but yeah. So.
Well, thank you, Allison and Bradley. Thank you for connecting with us today. And we will definitely be in touch in regards to your presentation today, and hopefully we can have some positive dialogue together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we will move back to 5.6, electricity RFP.
Okay, thank you very much. So Lethbridge School Division currently has an electricity supply agreement with NMAX Energy that will expire in June 2022. So a little ways out. A while back, we engaged the services of Energy Associates International to help us with in supporting our energy management and management of our energy portfolio. They're experts in electricity and natural gas, in reading the market, because these are very much commodities that go up and down depending on what's going on. On the advice of Energy Associates International,
they recommended that we, go to an RFP for, electricity supply when our contract with NMAX ended at the end of June 2022. The reason for that was that, most recently, there was a timeline for suppliers to go, that were coal generated, a generator to get out of to move to natural gas. They had quite a lengthy timeline, but some of them have moved that timeline up. And so that timeline being moved up has raised the forward cost of electricity, on a go-forward basis. And so what we did was we had to go out for an RFP, and the suppliers had to provide what we call indicative pricing. So this is what our pricing would be on this particular day going forward. Here's the terms and the conditions and that sort of thing. That pricing went out, came back, and then we take a look at it and see if we're getting the conditions that we're looking for. And then we go to what we call firm bid round. And a firm round is at 10 o'clock this date, this is what you're giving us as an offer. So all four, we had 4 respondents in the first one, all 4 got to go in the final round again and give us their final pricing. Once that final pricing comes in, we have about an hour and a half to sign a contract. Again, it's a commodity. So firm price bidders, and then I have to sign on it. So I have signed a contract, and I had alerted you to the fact that this is going to happen. The firm price came in at 10 o'clock on March 10th, and the contract was signed with the lowest respondent, which is Capital Power, at a 5-year rate of $55.45 per megawatt hour. Our current rate right now is $56.63. Our consultants were overjoyed because they said, if you can get anything around the 55, within plus minus 5%, you're doing really great. And so we were very excited about that. And then the administration fee came in at 10 cents per megawatt hour, quite a bit lower than the other respondents. So the contract was signed. So what this means is, first of all, our rate is about $1.18 per megawatt hour less than what we're paying now. Not a huge amount of money. We're talking about $12,000. Not a lot of money. But however, this has given us budget certainty going out to December 2026, which is really, really exciting with that. So quite pleased with what we came up with. And so I asked that the board approve the electricity contract that was signed with Capital Power at $55.45 per megawatt hour from July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2026. Thank you, Christine. Doug?
It's recommended the board approves the electricity supply contract signed with Capital Power at $55.45 megawatts from July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2026.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? So carried. Thank you. Now we move on to 5.7, Performance Infrastructure Program.
Thank you very much. You will have seen I provided this for you in paper copy. Don't know, Leanne, if you have a electronic copy for that? Okay, perfect. Thank you. I apologize that this has come at a late date for the board agenda. Back in July 2020, I don't know if you recall or not, but we had a special meeting of the Board of Trustees to approve the awarding of an RFP for energy and infrastructure improvement projects with Johnson Controls. And that approval provided awarded Johnson Controls as the manager of this particular project that we were looking forward to. And the project was going to be around $4 million. Yesterday, after a lengthy process of Johnson Controls going out and doing what we call an energy and facilities needs audit with our facilities staff, looked at what our needs were, looked at what would be valuable to adjust to meet our energy replacement needs. They did an RFP for equipment that would be required based on what they were seeing in the audit. And we went through the proposal yesterday. The The initial business case of a comprehensive energy replacement project would impact about 9 schools and it's approximately $4.1 million. Our plan for this particular phase would be to fund that for our infrastructure maintenance and renewal funds that we've in fact deferred for this project. And so we have that money set aside so that we can take on this project. Further to that, knowing that we had many more needs than $4.1 million in an energy retrofit, they've done what they said, they assessed what we call shovel-ready projects. And those have all been priced out and assessed, and they're about $3.6 million. And our hope is that when our CMR funding comes in and we get the details on that, that we'll be able to do one or all 3 of those particular projects with that CMR. And those are around $3.6 million. Now, if you go to the third page in, table 2 financial summary, you'll see the listing of schools here for about $4.1 million, and then the listing of schools for $3.6 million. Now, facility services just received this yesterday. There is a little bit of sifting and sorting they'd like to do within this listing. So for instance, general spirit, we believe we could take that on ourselves. So we probably remove that from this list. There's a couple of things that they might want to do is do a few things at LCI down here as part of the top part and save some other pieces for later. So a little bit of sifting and sorting, but relatively within those amounts. So what I'm asking you to approve today is approve that we could go forward with this type of project given the needs here, and approve me to sign a contract and then a possible amended contract if we get some more money, keeping within the pocket money that we have. The reason it's coming at this late date is that we have a very aggressive timeline to try and get things moving this summer so that all schools out, we can get a good, not all of it done, but a good chunk of it done. So you can understand we're doing LED lighting upgrades or even boiler and heat swap replacement, scratching the full ceilings apart, and do a lot of work there that really needs to be done with student sergeants. So we're really excited by this project. Estimated savings in electricity and natural gas by doing some of these replacements of boilers and LED lighting and heat pumps, chillers, that sort of thing, is approximately $200,000 a year. The economic impacts to the city of Lethbridge, if we do the initial $4 million, about 29 jobs. If we do full build out, if we get the CMR funding, we're talking 51 jobs and possible economic impact of $12 million in the city, which is really exciting. And then the last page of that document, Johnson Controls kind of gave us some fun data, which is always good to see, is about greenhouse gas emissions. By doing a project like this, we're saving 27,000 trees, 91 pines and forests, 202 passenger vehicles of CO2, 2,400 barrels of oil, 191 homes of energy, and 6 coal rail cars. So it's kind of, those are the fun stats with these kind of things that we get. So we're excited by this project. And really the plan is to stay in the scope of our IMR funding and then see what the CMR funding is. I hope we got over $4 million of CMR in this last round. We're hoping we receive $4 million in this round. Again, we can't go forward until we know that.
Thank you, Christine. Any questions for Christine? Clerk.
So Christine, the money, the capital cost money, that capital cost money, does that have to be spent on this project?
The CMR funding?
Yeah.
I'm not aware that CMR will have strings attached to it. We did have to submit an application for projects for CMR. Of course, we put in quite a few projects, one of which was doing a whole bunch of work to LCI, Victoria Park, Winston Churchill. My understanding is that you're using that as a guide to determine how much they might give a school division for funding. Whether we have to specifically stick to that or not is.
But we're applying for this money to do these projects.
The IMR we already have, so that first 4.1 million, we already have that money in the bank. That's money that's been deferred from the last year or two, and using some of this year, so we have that set aside, for this particular project, so that's already there. The 3.6 is money that, when the government announced the CMR grants, we're hoping we'll get enough to cover that plus more. So the second set, which they call the shovel rate, we haven't necessarily received the money yet for that.
Because it just, that first one there, White Mountain Horse, spending almost $1 million to save $16,000 a year.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily, the savings are kind of a bonus. It's not about the savings, it's about like, the lighting is not good in those schools. And as you saw today in the new school, how bright the lighting is, this will bring all those schools up to that standard. And so, yeah, like it's almost yellow, yeah.
Kind of orange.
It's an orange light, it's not the nice white light. So yeah, I mean, energy savings are a bonus. It's gonna help us operationally, and maybe help address some other areas that we are feeling crunches. And again, these are estimates. The bonus is taking care of the lighting, which is good for the kids. Boilers, we have boilers that are at the end of life that need to be replaced. And you start to see how many times a year they go down and we have to deal with them. So chillers, condensing units, like it's really making a better atmosphere for kids. And this type of money, it goes far.
Tyler.
Kind of along the same line as Clark there, but I completely understand, cooling towers and heat pumps and ventilation, especially stuff like that. I kind of have some issues with the LED lighting upgrades. I'd have to really know how bad it is to see by a little more yellow light than bright white light. Like when you look at DS Lakey, for example, I think the school's, it's older, but it's not super old. To think that we're gonna spend $280,000 there for lights, save $8,000, economically doesn't make sense, which, okay, fair enough, you're saying it's a bonus. But I have concerns about that when we have other schools that need ventilation or need something. I think that I think these almost need to be broken apart and prioritized.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the things that aren't even here, I don't know, $280,000 for some lights, and you add that up among however many schools. What about Buchanan and getting the gym there? To me, that almost might be a lot better idea than having somebody have a different color or a different band of light versus we could make that school have a decent gym proportional to it and everything. So
gym is really expensive.
I know, but when you add up all these things, we're in the millions. So I don't know how much a gym costs, but probably a few million. I don't know. You tell me. But the way this is broken down, for me, it would have to be changed and prioritized. Because if the way it is here, I can't vote for it in all honesty.
So it is going to be probably changed and prioritized. When I said this, the facilities department is sifting and sorting, they just got this, and we want to be able to go forward as quickly as possible with this. They're probably, you're right, just like he might drop down to the bottom, and something else might move up. But these, I said, the sift and sort, by keeping him in 4 million, which is IMR, and then whatever we can do to get our CMR. So we will be, the facilities department is going to be sifting and sorting a bit. I'm trying to get approval, so I guess, within the parameters of our funding, go ahead with this type of project. That's what I'm announcing for. Because I'm not the expert, my facility guys are, so, when they say this is a need, I trust that it's the experts.
I agree, and they are the experts. I'm not comfortable with it. So if I'm not comfortable with it at this point, I'm gonna have a hard, I can't vote in favor of this right now just because of that, I know to me, there's a lot of things more important than lights, and I don't know exactly where lights rank is. So that's my issue, sorry.
What I do want to point out is you did approve a scope order for this when we did in July. Potential for $4 million energy retrofit when we engaged Johnson Controls. And so this is, it's surprising. to me. I just want to make that comment.
Jen. Well, just kind of, I wish we had a little longer to kind of look at this, but just kind of looking at that last page. My gosh, we just came from a school that, is going to produce 105% of electricity because they've put some solar panels on. And done a lot more than that, but I mean, that was just a start. And I think it's about time that we started looking seriously, at what we can do, with what's happening with the climate, problem. And, I think there's a lot more we can do, but I think this is a good start. And I don't know, exactly whether we should just do the first part or the whole entire program. But I think it's about time, and it'll send a message, maybe, that there's other government organizations in this city that may can follow suit. I'm totally in favor of doing something like this. I think it's about time.
Christine, do you think there's any value of just holding this for a moment? I know it's on the board here right now, but maybe looking at our facility report, you could maybe talk about that, because we have a lot of things that are in place right now that have projects that are being completed, have been completed. Because I think we need to be reminded of what we've been doing in the past year or two, and maybe reviewing that, and then maybe coming back to this, because there are questions about dollars being put out and what's being neglected. There's a feeling, and I'm not sure if that's, maybe we need a little clarity on that. I don't know, I'm asking the board members, would you like to hear from Christine on that? Because that report will be out. And then maybe we can kind of have some reflection.
And that's, the board could put this to the end of the meeting. The concept was presented in July. It was the amount of money in July. And so the RFP was forward, that work's been done. If the board's feeling like they didn't necessarily understand what the July 20th RFP was about, or if they need, we could always maybe hook Daniel up to Teams to walk through and explain things. And if there's other projects that I don't even know what Jim cost, that Jim would be, but I think that the long term, as Christine said, and I think that maybe if, having Daniel hook up to bring some clarity might be helpful, because it sounded like the board would like some clarity in terms of where does this lie, where do these things lie in terms of the rest of the priorities and facilities.
I don't think it's, like I said, that most of this stuff, I'm totally good with, and depending where they rank, but right now, to me, it's not ranked. It's, some of these things are kind of all put in together. I don't know how much one section costs versus the other, how important one is versus the other. And like I said, it's not that I didn't agree with Pat doing a study and seeing what was there and getting funding and getting a plan in place. And I think I'd be surprised if you took a vote that it didn't go through. I think it'll go through. I'd probably be the only guy that votes against it. But it's, I'm just saying, I'm just not comfortable with $280,000 for some lights and GS Lakey when I think there might be a better place to spend it. So I don't have an issue with everything that's here. I think maybe what might be better is if we had, or I don't know what your timing is on this, or what you have to have done by when, but if they if they reprioritize it and kind of broke it out, and right, that's good for me, but like I said, you can send it to a vote, and it's probably gonna go through, and you'll probably be fine anyway, but that's my concern with it. It's just kind of how it's put together and where I think maybe we could be doing something better, but I do agree that, you know, your guys know the buildings, already know things that need to be done.
This isn't the final priority, because they are, Daniel and Chris do want to move some things around and change it. There's some things they will take out because we can't do that. They discussed this yesterday too. It's just they really would like us to, in order to get moving, Daniel and Chris have to make the decision on the listing of where they want things by next week. So that we can, otherwise, that's our window to really start. We have probably a little bit of a leeway, but here it's very exciting. So that's why we're saying, can you approve us in the pocket of money in the projects, given the budget that we're asking for. This will get, this is that they gave us, we're going to be moving around to meet our purpose.
Given the fact that we talked about this Johnson Controls last year, I recognize that. And when I look at the list and I see things like heat pump replacement and cooling towers and boiler replacements, and I'm not sure, well, I know that if you'd have told me last July, let's go to Johnson Controls, so we're thinking of spending, you know, $318,000 to change light bulbs and upgrade the lighting system at least at Churchill. That would have kind of stood out for me. I think boiler replacement, all those things, and I don't know what I was thinking that it would be, but I can't wrap my head right now, and I probably should be able to. I can't wrap my head into a $320,000 lighting bill. That's the struggle that I'm having. So I'd like to see it prioritized, and how much are the heat pumps, but then when I look at GS Lakey, it's $280 just for lighting. General Stewart is $48,000 just for lighting. Churchill is $320 just for lighting.
I have a pretty detailed, somewhat of a detailed report here, but it's bigger detailed reports. Our part, we got like pages of that. But so, we can certainly, if you want to have a special meeting next week, we can do that too. That for that, we can certainly do that. If like postpone it to session. That makes you more comfortable.
Thank you, Johnny. Your hand was up. Is it still up? I was asking Doug because his facilities, if it's not gone through facilities, the facilities economic program or anything like that. So,
I'd like to see us revisit this, and if we could have a special meeting for it, because there's too many questions, because it may be very, very valuable for us to follow through with it. But I do think I'm hearing from more than 2 or 3 people that we'd like more detail. So we could have a meeting, Christine, next week, and then we can do it on Zoom or whatever, and then get more clarity on that.
all right, can we set a date? Do we set a date now for that, or the day later? Thank you. All right, we will move on to 5.8 pandemic plan. This is a new addition to our agenda. It will be a standing item on our agenda. We've had several trustees have had engagements with community members, parents, and staff just about processes of how we make our decisions in the context of the pandemic. We're over a year in. We know that staff are doing incredible things and staff are exhausted. Students are doing incredible things and students are exhausted. And families are weary and and we're ready to come out of this season. But we are still in it. And one thing that the board has discussed and that we believe is valuable is to have increased transparency and community engagement in this area. And so what we will be doing moving forward is the pandemic plan will be a standing item in our agenda, so that the board can keep you apprised of process and just where we're standing within conversation. Today, within our in-camera, the board had the opportunity to review data and look at the trends of the COVID-19 impact in Lethbridge School Division School. And although at this time we can't share data specific to staff and human resource matters, we can share some highlights from information specific to Lethbridge School Division. So our active cases within our city on February 7th, we had 175 active cases. And as of this month, we have 502 active cases. So we've increased exponentially within our city. At the division level, we currently have 144 staff in quarantine, and we also have over 1,600 students in quarantine. Our division family, our division community has been impacted significantly from COVID. At this time, I just want to say the board extends appreciation to the staff. You continue to deliver quality learning both in school and at home, and sometimes both. And you juggle many quarantines, and we're incredibly thankful that we can work together to support the children in Lethbridge. And we know that this brings incredible difficulties within home, incredible difficulties within families, when it's impacting work, when it's impacting rhythms. So we thank you for your perseverance and just continued efforts to support your children as well as our school division. And as a board, we will continue to look at information on an ongoing manner, and we'll be reviewing trends again after the Easter break. And one of the things that we have chosen to do as a board and as a division is on our division webpage. We have now posted our pandemic plan so it can be accessed. I know there's been lots of questions from the community as to what the pandemic plan is and what information is on there. So that can be accessed under the COVID-19 information page. And we will also be posting online our considerations for change. We have in our conversation, we have questions that guide our decision making. And so to help you better understand what guides our discussion, we will be posting summaries of these conversations. So that will be coming up within the next few days. And so the questions that will be on there are there changes from Alberta Health Services, Alberta Education, or OHS that would suggest we need to maintain, enhance, or reduce COVID-19 protocol? Does community transmission information suggest we need to maintain, enhance, or reduce COVID-19 protocol? Does school COVID-19 information suggest we need to maintain, enhance, or reduce COVID-19 protocol? Does organizational status information suggest we need to maintain, enhance, or reduce COVID-19 protocol? And are there other factors we need to consider when deciding if we should maintain, enhance, or reduce COVID-19 protocol? So that information will be found on the division website. I don't have a solid date, but it will be coming up soon, so keep your eyes open for that. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, we have public forum response. We saw Allison and Bradley about a half an hour ago on our team, and Allison referred to a letter of response, and that is included here within the agenda for you to look at. Yeah. Now let's talk about some highlights. Does anybody have any division highlights they would like to share? Doug, was your hand up?
I was very fortunate last week to be part of an interview committee for possible principalships in our district, and it was really encouraging to see the development of our staff that have been applying for it, and it was very invigorating, and I'm very proud to say that we have a great amount of very, very dedicated and well-qualified people applying for jobs. And I just wanted to share it. That was a real highlight for myself personally, and I believe for the board too. And just on a personal note, it's a real highlight that in 5 years from now, I will have a grandson that will be attending the public system. His name is York James, and he was born last week. And he will have a great education in our division. So I thought you should know that, be well aware. Thank you.
Look out, Lethbridge School Division.
Yeah, good people.
Look out. Thank you, Doug. Would anybody else like to share today? Donna.
It's been my privilege to go to Healthy Lethbridge Wellness, and that is a committee that belongs in Lethbridge. And there's a health all over Lethbridge in various forms. So we had a meeting last week. It was very productive, and it was really enjoyable to be part of that. I too have to say that the people who applied for the positions in Lethbridge were outstanding. It was a wonderful thing to get to know them better. Then the other thing I went to was a Canadian Mental Health Association conference for 2 days, and there were really a lot of wonderful speakers. But my favorite, I'll give you my favorite, was Dr. Charles Ells, and he gave a lecture on what happens to the brain in trauma and after trauma, post-trauma. So he said, after coming out of trauma, like if there's a tornado and it wipes out your city, or there's a flash flood, or there's a fire, or now we're in a pandemic. Coming out of a situation of trauma, 10% of the people will experience post-traumatic stress. 15% of people don't experience anything. It's like this raw that happened. But what's so interesting is 75% of the people experience post-traumatic growth. We humans rebuild, and we grow from all of the stress things that happen in our lives. So I thought he was the most interesting for me, but I'm sure other people are going to talk about some other, the keynote speakers were outstanding.
Thank you, Donna. Anyone else like to share? Tyler.
Oh, sure. I think they're all over with this one. It could have related to the last pandemic plan, but just wanted to say kudos for Bradley for coming in the public forum again and being tenacious about getting things done. I think it's great. I hoped at this point we could be talking about the pandemic plan and how we're going to move forward with extracurricular and co-curricular, and unfortunately our numbers are just horrific in this town, which are preventing even schools that we're looking at opening up and trying to get going and, you know, kind of put the brakes on. Everybody's kind of having to put the brakes on with everything that's going on here. But I do hope that, similar to what Bradley and Allison brought up in their public forum, that there is a way to possibly engage kids online without the COVID protocol issues. So I applaud him for thinking of that, bringing it forward, and trying to find a way, given our restraints of what we can do. So I would say to them, and I guess in the public forum I can say whatever, so we're not having a big old conversation back and forth in the public forum. But the pandemic plan wasn't necessarily designed to incorporate online activities. I don't think it was really a thought process that happened when the pandemic plan was put in place however long ago. But I do hope that if Bradley has the support of staff and administration at the school, that the school could bring forward a proposal to central office, proceed with some type of plan on there. And just speaking personally for me, not for anyone else, I don't see why there necessarily would be a problem in updating a pandemic plan to be able to incorporate online activities where they're not in-person kind of things. So I want to say thanks for bringing that forward.
Great, thank you, Tyler. Anyone else have a highlight to share? All right. Well, I was thrilled that we were chosen to receive a new school. That was the highlight, and to be able to the next week tour another new school. So I think there are silver linings for our division in this season. Okay, next on our agenda, we have my board chair report. So I'll kind of, I was like Donna, one of my highlights was the Canadian Mental Health Association conference. It was on March 9th to 10th, and Donna, Jan, and I attended. And it was a very enriching conference with timely information and perspective, considering what season we find ourselves in. Like Donna said, the keynote speakers were really, really phenomenal. We heard from Dr. Susan Hobb out of Vancouver, and she spoke about burnout and what is it, and she spoke to what the three components of burnout are: emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and depersonalization, and reduced efficiency or accomplishment. And she really focused on the fact that it's less to do with your fit for the job over what is happening in your brain. And we're in a season where there's just a lot happening, and our staff are feeling overwhelmed. And I know leaders within our division are in the midst of their stress and a lot of going on, are supporting our leadership and our staff team. So cheers to you for continuing that work, but I think it's a conversation that needs to continue. We need to just continue to be mindful of the mental wellness of our staff. And so she also spoke about how to protect ourselves from burnout, and then the things that define resilient lives. We also heard about suicide awareness in the workplace and just some of the impact of COVID on mental wellness and the essentials of mental health support. Donna mentioned Dr. Charles Ells, and he spoke about sanctuary trauma, and the question that drove his presentation was, is your organization psychologically safe? And what structures are in place in your organization that contribute to sanctuary trauma? So sanctuary trauma would be, for example, if you have staff away on a mental health leave, when they return to the workplace, are they re-traumatized, or are there checks and balances and steps and a culture in place in which that person can feel safe to return and they're not traumatized again? And so then he spoke to policy, how it needs to not be a tick in the box, but the culture of your organization is essential in moving policy forward and giving it life. We also heard from two speakers on LGBTQ2S plus inclusion within your organization, and a lot of that presentation was information and capacity building. That was very beneficial. And then finally, we learned about getting started on your workplace mental health strategy, and I really appreciated this one. They spoke to assessing your corporation, looking at quantitative data for baseline for strategy, and then really diving in top to bottom through your organization and assessing where are the gaps and how can we fill those gaps and provide support and structures for our staff to be for their mental wellness to be supported. So I do have information on all this, so I'll be sending this out to you. On March the 13th, we also had 3 ministers come visit us: Adriana LaGrange, Prasad Prada, Minister of Infrastructure, and Grant Harder, Minister of Red Tape Reduction. We met at Dr. Robert Claxton Elementary School, where the new West Side School in Erie Station was announced, and then we were able to take the ministers on a tour of Dr. Claxton. So that was really fantastic. We got to show off the new school and just speak to the theme of the school, renewable energy, as well as our new pilot e-learning project that will be housed in that school. So that was a great weekend with the ministers. And that is all I have for my report. So now we'll move on to the associate superintendent reports. First, business affairs, Christine.
I pretty much talked all my highlights. They were all covered in presentations, so unless you have any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you for the school visit. That was awesome.
Oh, you're most welcome. Just, yeah, we're always excited to show off that school, so I'm pretty proud. Thank you.
Mike, human resources.
Thank you. So in terms of report here, a couple things just to be aware of. One of the exciting things that's happening when we talk about the supporting our schools section, we talked a little bit about earlier about substitutes, that sort of thing. We do have a number of new teachers coming on board and applying for our substitute teaching list. So the University of Lethbridge has a number of grads graduating in April, and so we've been working with them, getting them ready for when they're graduating and getting them on our substitute list and potentially even hiring them. So that's really exciting. Always happy to partner with the University of Lethbridge, and certainly excited about getting their grads. In terms of the 2021-22 staffing update, we are in the process of preparing for staffing for next year. As you heard, we've got a number of interviews happening for administrative positions, specifically for principal positions, and then we also have a coordinator of inclusive education position that's happening. And one of the things that's occurring right now is we're working with our school administrators to make sure that we've got all of our staffing lists correct, that we've got the amount of the contracts correct and full-time equivalent, assignments correct, and all those sorts of things. So when we do get our specific detailed budget from the government, we can move very quickly to allocate staffing out to schools and get the staffing process really rolling. So schools have been doing a great job with it, and we're making progress. We would just love to get our budget numbers so we can be a little more precise. That's it for me, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions for Mike? All right, instructional services, Maureen.
Thanks, Christy. Really, I feel like most of my time has been consumed with COVID and meetings and connecting with teams, but we've been doing a tremendous amount of work in instructional services on many other fronts as well, given the time of year. March is always report card season, it is hiring season, it is budget season, and then all those other good things. Some dates I'd like to just draw the board's attention to. We've finalized the Indigenous education graduation for June 22nd and 23rd. Of course, that's going to look a lot different than it has traditionally, but we're looking at a drive-in method, assuming that all things are a go with the restrictions that we'll present at that time. We're looking forward to having Charlie Moore come and visit us again virtually. On the 22nd, she'll be meeting with our LSTs, Winston Churchill and Galbraith, continuing their inclusive journey that they started 2 years ago. Curriculum and instruction, Karen and I are fortunate to have secured a French immersion consultant to work with us on single track immersion. So we've had our first meeting and we look forward to continuing developing a bit of a timeline, looking at programming, looking at staffing, looking at language acquisition, looking at how does a building in a single track school look different from a dual track school. So lots of great conversation preliminarily, and we look forward to continuing that learning and sharing with our teachers and our administrators as well. As you all know, early education programming registration started, and that is ticking along very well. There was a request and some concern or support towards really making sure we spend some time paying attention to our students who are impacted by boundaries and their transitions. And so we did have our first conversation with administrators talking about what articulation looks like, and then how does our conversation look when we're also talking about students who are impacted by boundaries newly moving into new schools. So that conversation has been initiated as well. And then lastly, yeah, thanks, Mike. Inclusive Ed coordinator, that's an exciting piece to be looking at hiring, and those interviews are coming up shortly here as well.
Thank you, Maureen. Any questions for Maureen? Right, seeing none, we'll move on to superintendent report. Cheryl.
The board priority report is there for you. Just want to point out a few highlights. So under literacy and numeracy, we talk about our literacy and FL lead teacher, Bev Smith. We talk about our numeracy lead teacher, Jen Giles. And I just want to point out, it's always interesting, for example, when we did recent interviews, how many times those names come up in terms of doing good work with schools and making a difference to staff and transforming practice in classrooms. So, it's quite, they do have a profound impact, even though they're not like out front and center and sort of get the rah all the time. They make a significant difference. And I think that under Karen's leadership, the division as director of curriculum heading in the right direction with assessment. Yesterday, the superintendents received an email saying from the province, we want to know what you're doing right now as a division for assessment in grades 1 to 5, that would be considered, valid, reliable assessment practices, right? In other words, measures. I think what the province is looking at, do we need provincial achievement tests? Do we need, what are our school jurisdictions doing? And I have to say, as I handed that task over to Karen, that, oh my goodness, like really, we've got great assessment practices. We've got Connors and Pinnell across all of our elementary schools. We've got Miffy across those schools. We do have valid measures of growth that are used to inform instruction. And that's taken place sort of with a lot of tenacity on Karen's part, Beth's part, Jen's part over the course of the last 3-4 years. I just wanted to really highlight that, that really those individuals have done really fine work in our schools. It starts to come out when we do things like fill out that. Like it caught me last night when I read that, and I thought, oh my goodness, if we're a jurisdiction, we can fill that out and be really confident in what we're submitting to the government as good practice right across our schools. So I wanted to mention that those are really critical areas of importance. And as well, Karen was telling me the other day that they keep saying the rollout of curriculum is going to happen. It's going to be publicly available for the end of March. Well, that's soon. So we're hoping that that should be up and that Karen can continue to work with our schools in terms of piloting, because we really like to be parts of piloting curriculum, because then you get a little bit of a glimpse in terms of what's coming, right? And so if we've got some schools who want to pilot, but first we've got to wait for that to come out. I'm going to skip over a whole bunch. I just want to point out and a thank you to instructional services under Mark's lead, the sort of staff wellness throwdowns. And March was sweet sleep. Or I don't think that's come to fruition for you or for a lot of the leaders in our schools. And so, we might have to do a little bit of carryover of that lead into Easter break, because right when you don't have the sweet sleep wellness piece, it does make a difference. So, and just a thank you to social services, and I know Mark takes the lead on that. We're going to have to get help from Christina and others, and get staff thinking about what to do to make themselves well. Boundary changes we've talked about, and I know that soon Mike and Mark will be visiting schools talking about staffing. And just to give a board an update, we're close to the sifting and sorting of the tennis boundary requests. Jesse and the tech team have worked really hard. They sifted and sorted kids, did all the identification on the maps, and sorted through all of that mess. Google Maps doesn't have the right postal codes, and secured a bunch of people to take care of that. And so we're on target. We're on track for getting things done. And although I was getting some blue pays, I also wanted to say, the inclusive department, when we think about transitions of some of these kids and boundary changes, already and team are doing a whole bunch of work with transitioning and talking to parents, worried parents, concerned parents, making sure that we've got everything in place for them, and as well as ESL parents. And I thought about it the other day when Adam talked to our leadership team. I can't remember which one. I think it was middle school leaders about, maybe it was elementary, the importance of communication to our ESL families who may not even know we've done boundaries. who may not even understand, be able to advocate for themselves that they want to do an audit attendance boundary form. And that's sort of a matter of privilege, right? That we really need to be thinking about how do we make sure that they understand what's happening. And so she's working hard on that as well. And that's that. That's a good question. Thank you. Any questions for Cheryl?
All right, at this point, it's 5:59. If we could have a motion to carry our meeting past 6 o'clock. That would be very good. Thank you. I mean, no, we wanted to, I appreciate that, but we do need the motion. I move that we carry on our meeting past 6 o'clock. Thank you. Call the question, all in favor? So carried. Thank you.
Okay, I'll keep going with the acknowledgement of excellence. Actually, I didn't say much about innovation because what our schools are doing right now is speak for innovation. If you take a look at acknowledgement of excellence, Gilbert Patterson, how they find ways to continue to engage students in activities, how they continue to celebrate fine arts, how they continue to make sure that there are things happening in the school. That's the showcase in and of itself right there. Then we've got Galbraith. Well, I was so excited to see Galbraith because what you see Galbraith celebrating there is a product of their inquiry-based professional learning question. And that was that and that's the board can see what generative dialogue inquiry-based professional learning does. It's not just about going to a conference and learning something. It's about framing a question and seeing what happens with that question when you actually implement it in a school and use that learning to move the school forward. And so Galbraith with Sandy and Andy, amazing things that they're doing with the whole trauma-informed practice and combining that, of course, with making sure it aligns with our priorities as a division and using universal lens and their visual really shows how they thought about how to make everything that we're doing as a division coherent. And Park Meadows, again, just that idea of, and what struck me about Park Meadows is not just innovation, but how you can continue to build community and connect the community was something really to celebrate with the Park Meadows notes of things that they've done over the course of the year so far. And calendar of events is next, and that's there. As always, if you see anything missing, please let me know. Just a note, if you recall, this Friday we have a team meeting with MLA Nathan Newdorf. And so, certainly if there are any questions that you have that you might want to prepare in advance for Nathan, he appreciates, of course, having that in advance in case he wants to do any research or find something out for you. So if you have any questions in advance, can you please send those to me, Anne? And I'll make sure that I take a look and then I'll confer with Tyler and Christine and we'll get those to Nathan by Thursday. So we would need any questions from you by Wednesday noon. So that doesn't give you a lot of time. If you've got any questions, you just let me know before you leave today, or areas that you'd like to explore with Nathan, just let us know when we'll put them together. Tyler.
I'm not sure which things we put on our calendar of events, but maybe March 31st is Green Shirt Day.
Yes, that's right.
It's just given the fact that other holidays are connected to it.
Thanks for pointing that out. And that's on our division website that Garrett has showcased. So yeah, that was that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I just have to comment on the fundraiser that was in the base. I just really disagree with that. I don't think it teaches our kids anything. It's very disrespectful, even though everybody is okay with going along with it. I don't agree with it at all. I think they could find other ways of raising money, maybe by raffling off the prize.
All right, Jen, just for clarification, your whole first part of your statement was not when you were putting your cloth onto your microphone. Would you be able to repeat your statement again? You were just hard to hear because when you were speaking at first, you were putting the sign in the sounding like this, so we couldn't hear you.
She didn't hear the first part?
No.
I just wanted to comment on the pies in the face at Park Meadows fundraising, that's all. I just feel that it's disrespectful. It's not teaching our kids anything, other than it's fun to throw a pie into the face of an adult. I think they could find other ways of raising money, like maybe raffling off the pies instead of throwing them in the face. I just disagree with it. Just my feelings on that.
Thank you, Jen. Any other questions for Cheryl? Any other questions for Cheryl? All right, we will move forward with our report. The first is the District School Council. Tyler and I attended this past month. The link to the minutes was included in the agenda. I'm not going to speak to all of the minutes. A couple of highlights were diploma exams and class exams. One of the points brought up by a parent was that diplomas are optional. Then final exams shouldn't be weighted at 30%. That was a concern that was brought up by a parent. If the province isn't mandating diplomas, then schools shouldn't be weighting exams to the same level. Another conversation that came up was extracurricular came up. Parents are not satisfied for the reasons given, so hopefully we'll be able to continue to have that conversation and just broaden that conversation. Allison referred to her esports submission, and I think even just with the whole communication piece, Cheryl spoke to the chain of command and chain of communication, and there seems to be a disconnect between what is a division decision and what is an administrator decision. And there are some moments where parents are feeling that the division is, quote, passed back onto the administrators. And so there's some lack of clarity, there's some confusion as to where they go to for an answer. So there was frustration in that area. And so those are the highlights that I will bring forward from Division School Council. Next, Facilities Committee.
All right, I want to mention that John and I were at that meeting, and I want to give out a congratulations to Christine Lee, Daniel Heaton, and Chris Chapman. Well, first of all, we toured the new school today, Robert Claxton. It's amazing. A lot of work went into that, and I know that you worked, Christine, you worked very closely with Daniel and his team, and what a beautiful school. I can hardly wait for the parents in South Lethbridge to be able to see that school and what it's all about, and just wonderful. Second part was we were going to talk about, we have an announcement, we have new, so all this is on the website, but just I'll hit a few things here. Obviously, we have a new designation for a elementary school on the west side. Again, congratulations to yourself, Christine, because it takes a lot of work and effort to make those applications, and you've always been very positive about it. And I can't wait to see what that's going to look like, because every school that we've been able to get has been such an improvement. Just the other thing, but in line with still getting schools, we still need modules. And so we're looking at those, and I don't know if those have been announced at this point, but we're trying to get some more for coal banks, and that's our issue. We do not have room on the west side, as most of our community does know that. I am going to just skip down, and I'm just going to ask maybe the trustees in their own time. If you look down further, you will look at, it's called the projects, proposed projects, and we had a question earlier in this meeting about where our dollars are spent. So if you, I'm not gonna go over it, I'm gonna ask you to take a look at it. But it goes through all the schools that have had projects and the timeline, and whatever you'll see in red, that means it's been completed. So, there is so much that goes into the, planning, and that comes from Daniel and Chris. And we go over that, and Jen and I were pleased to see how these projects are going. Obviously, we had that stimulation money that helped a lot, to the federal government. But, that being said, please review that. And again, for those people in the community, you can look on our website and see what these projects are all about.
Sorry, can I just clarify something?
Sure.
You have two reports here. You have the first report, which was last year's plan. So it starts at 2021, and that's where you see the red items that are we completed in this fiscal year.
Yes.
And it's a plan. So each year we make a plan of how we're going to spend money over 3 years. And things change and priorities change. Also, when you get, money added, like CMR partway through the year, that makes a change. But then the next report that is there, the second report that starts with 21, 22, these are our proposed projects in the next 3 years. And so that's the plan for the next 3 years, given what we just sort of completed. So some of those projects that you saw with the red completed will roll forward. Some may drop off as we change our priorities, depending on what we've done. We have taken care of some of those things in a different manner, are planning to take care of in a different manner. So those are two distinct reports. And so one is sort of the past plan and what we completed, and then the new plan going forward. So.
All right, thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks,
And that's it. Any further questions? Maybe direct them to me or maybe Christie.
You might know that, but just in case Christine's here. Can you explain the rekeying and, it says something else there, rekeying and software upgrade, just what that entails?
Under which?
I know it's under a few of the schools, but there's rekeying and hardware upgrade.
Oh, well, so there's two different ones that we're looking at. First of all, there's Bob system replacement. That's right at the top of the plan. Those are, we all have I don't have my keys with me, but there's this little Bob system that we have that we get into all our buildings. It's old, it's antiquated, can't replace the Bobs anymore. And frankly, we sort of might have lost, we need a better handle on what these are doing and who has them. And so we're going to replace the whole system across the division. That's that. There are some schools when you if they want hardware upgrade, the actual physical door hardware needs an upgrade. So then they need to be repeat when we do that. So every time we do a hardware upgrade, if for Jack Kramer comes in, we do keys in. So those are those type of upgrades. And their rekeying is expensive. It's not a cheap process. So I tell people don't lose your keys.
Thank you. Any questions for Doug? Okay, thanks, Doug. Poverty Intervention Committee. I'm really enjoying this committee. We seem to be getting momentum this year and being more productive and directed in serving kids. So a few highlights from the report that you had. University Drive Alliance Church was given 400 pounds of ground beef as a donation, and it's anticipated that this will be a continued, I don't know if in the same capacity, but a continued donation. And so when I wrote the report, 15 families so far have received 10-pound packages, and so these were going to be distributed equitably across all grade levels and across the community. So that was very exciting. For our WAM bags, typically we're adding a recipe book and families who need emergency food for a weekend gain pantry staples and then a grocery gift card to the amount of $25 to supplement for their meat and milk and other essentials. And on March 17th, we met on Teams again as a committee for the second time, and we increased the card amount to $35. So we're finding groceries are just getting to be a little too expensive, and so this will just help families, and especially families, larger families. A microsite for the Poverty Intervention Committee has been set up. Garrett did a fantastic job putting that on the website for us. So community members and staff members can go under the board tab to find poverty intervention and learn more information about what our committee does and how we serve students and families in poverty. And Sasha Donahue, our AHS representative, has proposed an assessment of poverty and food security within our division. And so we're in the process of exploring what this could look like. And ultimately what we're hoping is that the analysis would help us see the exact depth of poverty in our city from a food insecurity lens, and then help us to be able to deliver support to these families. So we're in the process of just looking into that right now. And that is my report. Are there any questions? Christine?
Not a question, but some information that just came in this afternoon. As you may be aware, the summer games that was supposed to occur in 2021, they thought maybe in 2020, thought maybe could go in 2021, had to be, of course, canceled. And so the summer games will be dropping off tomorrow, 800 backpacks for the Ready, Set, Go program. So we're pretty excited about that. But that's the report.
Thank you. That's very exciting. That's fantastic. All right, ATA Local Council. Stan.
You've got my report there, and in spite of COVID restrictions, they're moving along with their different events, the new teacher induction and a few other things that they're doing. The only other thing I was just going to mention, if any one of the trustees was scheduled to attend the April meeting, they canceled that because of Easter break. So the next meeting will be Wednesday, May the 5th.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen? All right, Policy Advisory Committee.
It's in enclosure 9.5, you could read it as a junior executive.
Thank you, Lola. And 9.6 ASBA General Meeting.
Well, it's a delight to have the minister come and talk to the zone, and you can read my report. Many of you were at that meeting and heard her, so it was really nice. I asked that Bill 52 sent to be sent to trustees. The zone has asked us to look at it, and if we could send it up for us to get a look at before we discuss it. Thanks.
Thanks, Donna. Any questions for Donna? All right, next is correspondence. We have our letter to the city of Lethbridge, thanking them for their collaboration in our pursuing the elementary school on the west side, as well as a letter to Mr. Adriana LaGrange, thanking her for selecting us to receive the new school. We also received yesterday a letter from Minister LaGrange responding to our letter of advocacy for funding. So I will leave that up so you can read through that. I'm not going to read that to you because I cannot see it, but we will have that up for you to look through.
Hold on to your hat, let's see what comes out of the 40 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not. We'll figure March 3rd till March 31st.
All right, and that is all we have. So this meeting is adjourned and we will move back into our meeting. Thank you.